And I suppose we're live. Alright, so I'll go ahead and start from the top down. I'll just call upon each person and allow them to introduce themselves. If you also would like to uh, start us off.
Are we accounting for who said they wouldn't have voice? I recall there were a few of those.
I'll give them time to just send it in text. Deuce, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Of course. Hello. I'm Dios. Joined maybe a month or two ago to help with design, and I've been helping with just random stuff that can help with implementing better design choices for the game.
And I'm very happy that they are with us. Fuja, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Still have to get used to push to talk. Well, hello, it's me, Fuja. I don't know. What do you say in introductions? I have no idea.
That was good enough. It's fine.
All right. And Game Dungeon, who currently does not have a mic. They're one of our programmers. Then we have Hard
Christian. I'm one of the new programmers. I've implemented a couple of features and a bug or two.
And finally, we have Hiralainen, our team lead programmer.
Yes, hello. I'm Hiralainen and I'm the lead programmer. And so I basically oversee the programming side of things to check others' work and prove it when it's good enough.
And then we have Castorisk. Also does not have a mic at this time. And then we have Nagarath, who is responsible for our trailers.
Yeah, hello. Usually make the trailers and also a little bit of testing on occasion, now and again.
He does a wonderful job. Then we have Oliver Ritter, one of our
Hello.
resident celebrities.
Yeah, I'm Oliver. I'm head of the sound. I do lots of other things here and there. I've been working on programming a bit for this release.
And we have Film, one of our talented programmers, recently stepped away but is still making prototypes.
Yeah, I did get some stuff in for 056 or 059 we're on now. Wow, 059. So I invited myself to the launch party here. I am also messing around with the code, but no promises anything I write ends up in.
And finally, we have Uniao, who has just joined us, one of our graphics artists from quite some time.
Hello, that was a good timing. So I might do some stuff for the 3D updates and come back with the things in general, but that is not confirmed. I'll see.
And there we
But
have
I would
it.
like to.
The whole 5 team, or at least those who could show up.
Yeah, still quite a few of us. Might be as many as last time, even.
So, my brain's blinked out. I'm sorry.
I mean, should we start with talking about the new release, since that's the most important part?
For sure. All right.
We should have like a timeline for future references of addressing each point, a document.
I've kept them in the past. We struggled with all of them. But so yeah, this update, this release, 0.5.9, is probably, in my opinion, one of the most substantial updates we've made to this date. At least in terms of sheer quantity of features.
It's definitely had a lot of like big features, chunky things.
I mean,
I feel like it's probably one of the bigger ones since we switched from Ogre. Probably.
I don't know.
Seems like could be a. I'll go ahead. My bad.
We might have the tie between switching to Ogre and switching from Leviathan to Godo.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Deuce. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, it would probably be worthy of a 0.6 update, but we mentioned before we probably shouldn't scramble or like post-actively rewrite the release version before making it public to the audience.
Yeah, it was 0.6 all along. Surprise.
And it just now.
So yeah, among many of the features, one of my favorites gotta be the engulfment revamp.
Well, Casterisk was the one who helmed that. So
Yeah.
if they could type some things to explain how that works.
They did an excellent job in both designing it and implementing it.
It looks nice.
It's now very fun to like gobble up loads of creatures.
Finally, predation has a rightful place as one of the more fun elements of the game.
I always thought it was fun, but this one is definitely a great improvement. That combined with Cilia can really make for some interesting gameplay on occasion. For sure, definitely.
Now I just gotta balance it.
Yeah, it just looks better than walking into a cell and just overlapping with them, almost like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, now they actually get sucked into you. It's much more satisfying.
So yes, the revamp is in essence changed from the original mode where you would just enter an engulfment mode and basically you would disable your collision so you could move into other entities and damage them in doing so. And you'd absorb their resources. After the revamp, you now actually absorb these cells and they are stuck inside of you as you slowly digest them. You also cannot digest cellulose or chitin unless you have the appropriate enzymes, cellulase or chitinase. Easy to remember. That actually grants a twofold feature in that those cell walls are now highly formidable from engulfment until your predators evolve, and you are actually able. I'm sorry. And it actually allows us to specify and differentiate the different diets that you would find in later stages, such as herbivore and etc. Assuming your plants of your world are actually composed of cellulose.
I think that's the engulfment revamp covered. Should we talk about something else? I think one of the main things for increasing replayability and just increasing the feel of how big the world is and how big the game is the procedural patch map. So Chemical, who implemented that, is not currently with us, so can't explain the features, but I guess I can give a high-level overview in that whereas before you had just the static one continent world of Pangonia, or I suppose in the last release it was changed to be a dynamically named continent. But now every single game will be different with a dynamically generated patch map, which is very cool.
One other thing, which I think every person in the community has been hyped for the past 10 years, and is the Microscopic editor, which obviously has a lot of hype around it. And Higher Linen would be best to explain that, I think. If it's available.
Yeah, I'm here. I think last time when we got the like the early multicellular prototype, people were a bit more excited. So I think that was already kind of a milestone in itself, that we are finally going to get something that's past the microbe stage. So, but anyway, this release has the next part of the prototype, which didn't end up being as big as I planned initially, because I had to help finish many of the pretty big features, so I didn't have as much time as I thought I would. And of course, the classic thing that always happens is that you underestimate the time required to implement some feature in programming. So, but yeah, we got the late multicellular, or also known as macroscopic editor, at least now, or the basic part of it. So the metaball structure editing and tissue types creation with the cell editor, that's like the core part that I managed to get done. And well, I hope to improve the prototype in the future and get started on the later prototypes as well.
It's certainly a very exciting thing. When I get the chance and I actually finish up the last few concepts I've been working on, I think I'll start working on kind of emphasizing and building up some of their ideas on how the later stages will work in preparation for that.
Very good idea.
But first we need to actually solidify basically our end plans for the microbe stage as we prepare to close that chapter.
That's a scary thought. Exciting too, but scary.
I'm not looking forward to having to design the later stages.
Don't worry, there's still a fair amount of time and work left to get the microbe stage polished. So
we'll get through it though. We'll make it.
Go slower. Make it easier on you.
It's very substantial.
we could all quit, and then no one will work on the microbe stage anymore, and you'd have all the time in the world. But then there'd be no game.
Oh, there's trade-offs on everything, you know.
I'm sure as hype builds, there'll be more people interested in designing the features they play more. So as more people play multicellular and bigger stages, a lot of people will be really interested and have a lot of ideas.
For sure. In fact, I've seen plenty of new ideas in the community lately. I hope that continues, because it may not always seem like it, but we are listening and watching, spying.
Interesting.
What other big features haven't we talked about?
Turning speed and cilia. That's a big one. Not many people have been talking about it, but they're relatively simple compared to the other features, for sure. But that alone actually makes things a little more interesting, because no longer do you have to worry about that big cell with a bunch of pili on the front just instantly turning around and just whiplashing you out of existence. Now they slowly turn around like some kind of boat, and that makes things a lot more interesting. Of course, unless they have cilia.
Yeah, it means you do need cilia in order to be an effective agile predator.
Also, I'd just like to say that cilia is a very important feature of eukaryotes, so it opens out a lot of, diversity options for future with upgrades and stuff.
For sure.
Example, like scent, for example, and for lack of a better word, suction, where you absorb currents towards you, things along that nature.
And I very much enjoyed playtesting the PR that was it Fuja that made based off of Film's prototype?
I think that was Casterisk.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I really enjoyed playtesting that because it was just very fun. I never expected playing as a vacuum cleaner would be very engaging, but it is.
New cell type just dropped. Vacuum cleaner.
So yeah, my hopes is that we can turn that into a potential upgrade path for Cilia to allow players to have that function, and that would be very exciting.
First, we need to make upgrade paths.
Indeed, indeed.
We have
so.
some of that in with the organelle modify menus, but yeah.
Right now we have a sort of pseudo implementation with the lysosomes and the cilia. Or wait, not the cilia.
The chemoreceptor.
Yeah, yes.
Signaling digits, right?
I'm sorry?
And the the chemoreceptors.
Yes, yeah. That was when it was first debuted, is with the chemoreceptors. And it's simple, but it works very well.
Oh, you know what's something we forgot? Game Dungeon, just mentioned. Spawn system, probably one of the most important parts of this update.
Oh yes, something that many people probably won't think about, but
Yeah.
it has made a drastic change in the enjoyability of Thrive. Because before our spawn system was reworked, you could go minutes, if not an entire hour, encountering absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Now you're essentially guaranteed to encounter a cell almost always, and at least always guaranteed to encounter compounds. May not always be the ones you need, but you'll find something, and that's what matters.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
good-
definitely more of you only notice it when it's not as good kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like I doubt anyone will ever mention it again.
It's also something you could adapt around, because the old system essentially just threw objects in a circle around the player, which A, caused some bugs, but also meant that the absolute last thing you should do if there's nothing around you is go in one direction and look for new spawning grounds, because you're guaranteed to ignore everything the game gave you. Which is why I found, like, watching a lot of YouTube videos, new players would go migrate, because that's what you think you should do, whereas more experienced players just spin in a circle until the gods are favorable. So I think it's something that you notice less as you get more skilled at the old version of the game's quirks.
Now, here's a scary little fact. That was actually a rework of the spawn system that was actually much worse before that. I can't remember quite how it was like though. It's been some time.
Are you
I think
talking about the biasing the spawning towards the direction the player is moving in?
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, yes, that's how it
Because,
was.
I mean, before that, the spawning could spawn as much stuff behind you as in front of you, so you had even lower chance of finding anything.
That's all in the past now. I'm sure we'll find bugs in the new system. I think I found one today, but it will be improved. It is improved.
All in time.
You know, it's a good sign when even we are forgetting how many features are in the update. Maybe not for bug catching, but for the sake of making a good game.
Yeah, but what else are we? The new game settings. I guess I can talk about that.
Please do.
I saw lots of people who played Thrive complaining that it was either too easy or too hard, and obviously people have subjective opinions on how difficult these things are. So I thought, well, the best thing for us to do moving forward is to add difficulty customization, which is the main point of the new game settings that are now in. So you'll now go to a new screen when starting a game to select a load of difficulty options and a load of planet options. And this will be expanded as we continue, but it's useful to have this here to accommodate people who might find it too hard or too easy otherwise.
Oh, thermosynthesis.
Ah, yes, that's the one. Yeah, that's currently it's a very basic implementation of it. It's kind of like how photosynthesis works in the game, where you just sit in the patch, and depending on how hot the patch is, you'll generate some ATP. In future, we're hoping to replace that with a system where you have to actively engage in finding heat gradients and staying with them. But it's good enough for now, and it's a demonstration of the Lork toggle that's in the new game settings as well.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting, though I must confess I'm unsure of what other non-lock features we might be able to add in the future. There's not many. At least not many that are still within the realm of plausibility.
Yeah, we would like that sort of stuff to be actual, like, scientific theories. It's just it hasn't actually turned up in the real world, which thermosynthesis is one of them. But yeah, it's hard to find other examples. Suggestions welcome.
I'll also say, I think that'll also be a big thing in, for example, the macroscopic stages where, on the forums, you think of people thinking, oh, like, what if I want to make a fire-breathing creature or whatever, which we don't see here, but would be a cool thing regardless. So it could just include a almost loosening of rules to allow more creative playthroughs, almost.
That's the idea.
Or if you're a real stickler for realism, you can turn on Lork and just play in the real world. But why would you want to do that?
Speaking of fire-breathing creatures, my pull request made it so that every cell in a colony can emit oxytoxy instead of just one. So you can be a giant shotgun creature.
That was a good transition into.
I did find it very fun testing that, actually. It's just like, yes,
Yeah.
I have an artillery now. Wow.
Also, as a side effect, now if any one of your colonies have any compounds, they display to the screen. So you can now know that you have iron or ammonia if you're multicellular.
Woohoo!
Right, is there anything else we've missed? The big features. I'm going back through the dev blog.
Oh, we always have the patch notes. Let's look.
The art gallery, perhaps?
Oh, yes, the art gallery. How did we forget the art gallery? Everybody forgets the art gallery.
It's because it's not in the proper game, but it's still a very nice thing to have outside of it.
It's very, very nice when it's well done, I must admit. It's something you can just, if you're feeling a bit tired and just want to relax for a bit, you can just listen to a nice jazz rendition of the main theme while gazing at the low polygon models of our cells.
Or the concept art. It's probably more polygons or equivalent in that. And then there are a bunch of other smaller changes, such as Easter eggs. Those are in the game now. Well, there is one Easter egg that may spawn randomly. It seemed to be spawning quite a lot in the release candidate, so I turned down the spawn rate. So I'm eager to see how many times people find it from now on. So let us know if you find the Easter egg. You'll know it when you see it. We've also got the patch-wide population system, which means that if you go extinct in a particular patch, but you still have members in another patch, you can move to the other members of that species. And there are a load of other small but nice changes, but you can read the full patch notes, I suppose, to see all of them. Do we have anything else from this release we want to talk about? Or shall we move on to questions?
I'm trying to think.
I'll go ahead. I was going to say, honestly, there's a patch list, so maybe we can link that, see if we forgot anything.
Sure. Let me just find that real quick. I think I was in the middle of doing it, but then I got sidetracked. Here
Does
we
anyone
go.
feel like they contributed something and did not get mentioned?
I kind of want to mention the roadmap to microbe completion. So Buckley talked about that, and I also kind of want to maybe contribute to that. But I think we are close to the point where we could actually slap the major microbe stage features we still are missing into like a rough map that 0.6 has this, 0.7 has this, etc. That would be pretty helpful because we could actually increase the version numbers. I didn't want to go to 0.6 because we haven't planned out when the microbe stage is complete like that. So
it'll be very exciting. I don't think we've ever really had a full roadmap with proper releases plotted out.
Yeah, kind of a caveat for this is that, well, as people work on Drive mostly when they have time, it's pretty uncertain when features are complete. So if we promise that 0.6 is like the next release,
Hello?
then
hello? Sorry, I think Buckley's having problems.
I don't know what that means.
That was a big problem.
I'm sorry, please continue.
So we don't actually know what features like the next release will definitely have. So I'm kind of thinking that we probably either we need to 1 week before release change the release number, or we need to do it so that once we have reached actually the milestone, then the next release can be called the milestone release. So 0.6 will be actually the one release after when we've reached that. Or well, I suppose if the previous release is basically almost reaches the milestone, then maybe I can promise to finish the final big feature, and then we can call the next release the 0.6, even though the feature is done, but it's not done yet. But
I doubt we'll get called out for upgrading our release if we promise a 0.5.10 and we go, actually, we're giving you 0.6.0. I don't think anyone's going to be mad that the investors didn't know in time.
Well, I mean, it's more of a maybe confusion thing. Maybe not everyone knows this, but there's this community Discord channel where people multiple times per day check the progress percentage on the next milestone on GitHub. So if it's suddenly renamed that, they will wonder what's going on.
Yeah, but that's not a big thing to correct. They'll just be like, what's going on? We've upgraded the release. There we go.
I guess, yeah, it needs to be accompanied by a code change to actually change the version numbers as well and stuff like that.
I think Buckley is having some troubles setting up the music player right now.
Don't mind me, please disregard.
Yeah, he played a Rickroll. I don't know how you accidentally do that. He said it happened accidentally.
So apparently if you try to copy the link from the bot's message, it gives you Rick Astley and not the actual link. So that's kind of what happened there. They did a little trolling.
As long as we don't get copyright strike for that.
It was under 3 seconds. I think we'll be fine.
What an amazing way to take down your enemies.
I think it's also free use since the copyright expired.
That's not possible because it's
I can
lifetime
attest
of the author plus 70 years, 90 years, something
It's 70 years, 75.
So. Yeah, from my own experience, putting never going to give you up in a video does lead it to get copyright striked.
Wait,
So-
really?
Yeah.
I thought it was
Sorry.
25 years. Or is that with like books?
No,
It's very long.
patents last
Like-
20 years, but copyright is basically forever. If someone does
Yeah.
something now, it's basically copyrighted until everyone dies.
Yeah,
Like
75 years. Mickey Mouse.
All right. Do we have anything else we want to discuss before we move on to answering the questions from the forum?
Nothing comes to mind personally.
I don't.
So I'm about to try this again. Please turn down the volume if it's too loud.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I'll bring up the forum threads on the stream now.
Please don't do reclass delete these. Okay.
Someone answer this.
All right. So where are we? Are we answering questions now?
I think we are.
Alrighty. So we did have that list. If I can just find it again. Here we are. So we'll be starting from the top to bottom. And I'll be focusing on Doom Lightning. And what they have asked is, what is your focus on 0.6 or the next version? And, well, we have yet to discuss that, so we can't exactly give a concrete answer. Why did the music stop?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was just turning down the volume for me because it was loud. My fault.
That's everyone.
Yeah, you need to right-click the bot and set its volume. But then it remembers it. I haven't had to adjust it this time.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Alright, so yeah, do y'all think we have any plans we can say we have for 0.6? I mean, I for one can say that we plan on addressing our roadmap a bit to have some more concrete plans, but other than that, there's not much we can really say.
I kind of already said that I'll continue with the prototypes, so basically my plan is to help get a few bugs or bigger features done. Probably the Auto Evo Exploring tool is a very high priority thing, so I'll review and push that forward and then run off to do more prototypes.
Fair enough.
I'll say I have no coding chops, mind you, so don't take this as a guarantee, but I think now could be a time to flesh out the environment almost, if anyone is willing to take focus on that. So I could help with creating concepts or finishing up concepts related to that.
There's an old standing PR on compound production, if Maxinovian's gonna manage to finish it.
He's been quite busy lately, so I think given another week or two, he might actually be able to continue development.
As always, won't make promises for people who aren't even on the call and can't defend themselves.
Who are we making promises for? Sorry, I disappeared for a second.
Did I make a promise? I'm sorry.
I was saying Maxinovian was working on the compound production, where your species, based on the compounds they're taking in and out, are going to change the environment, and the atmosphere numbers are going to start to matter. I'm super excited about that, but I'm not going to go say, oh yeah, this person I haven't talked to in like a month is totally going to do this in 3 months. I promised for him.
Sensible.
Again, I'm not
Sensible
doing that.
approach.
Fair enough. I was just going by what he told me recently, but sorry. Anyhow. So shall we move on?
What's the next question?
So next question by Doom Lightning are there plans to add or change patches? And I can say yes. Yes, there are. The ultimate plan is for patches themselves to have their own custom differences based on the environmental. What am I trying to say? The environmental conditions of the area. So obviously, you might notice that sometimes you'll have something like a surface patch, and right below that is a seafloor patch. And those patches will have conditions that may not entirely be sound because they're still based off the original conditions that we had before the random generation. Ideally, a surface or a seafloor patch is just below a surface would mean that it's shallow enough to actually get sunlight, when right now they don't. So that's something we plan to change when we get the chance.
Yeah, right now, although the patches are arranged procedurally, they're all, apart from the depth, I believe, they're all just the same as each other. The same
And
type.
they're static, right?
Yeah.
So they
So
have the
that-
same conditions and compounds.
Yeah, the hope is to make things more random in that regard.
I wonder if there are any other aquatic environments that we're missing with the current patch map. I remember it was brought up earlier that an algae bloom could be a biome, but then the point was brought up that that's composed of the biota more than the environment itself. So it's an interesting balance you have to walk with aquatic environments in the cell stage, at least.
Yeah, didn't we have a long think about forest biomes and whether they actually count as biomes because it's dependent on the
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
there.
And
And
we
that
tried
may
to-
not be there if you've not got trees.
We tried to define a tree, I remember.
It's certainly a large discussion that's going to take a little bit of thinking. I know I personally thought about something like considering biodensity in a region to determine what kind of region it was, but even that is kind of complex and doesn't consider all angles, so it's complicated.
It's also the fact that in the original concepts, all the plants would be procedural, which I am still very worried about and I wonder about. But there's that factor to consider.
Not just procedural, but possibly even the player.
Yeah, exactly. So, slippery slope there.
So, I suppose moving on from there, we have what is your vision or next steps on the macroscopic stage? And that will be going to Hiralainen.
Yeah. So my plan is to, well, maybe look at a few editor related things, or at least have some kind of look over the editor that it isn't too broken to continue, but basically the next step would be to add some macroscopic gameplay, and my idea is to basically have the meta balls in some kind of watery void or something like that, where you can move around a bit and kind of get some kind of 3D movement control done, and then immediately skip forward to like being on land and doing 3D movement on land, and so like really basic stuff, because I want to quickly get to the later stages to have the game skeleton entirely done as fast as possible without considering that would be actually playable or any fun at all the later prototypes.
All right. Thank you, Hiralainen. If there's anything else to add, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Bolsa is wondering about Auto Evo with Metaballs.
Hmm.
I don't know whether many of us have thought about that much.
Yeah, we'll at least someone should make the early multicellular auto evo first. So we don't even have that yet. So maybe people should think about that first.
Fair enough.
I actually put in code that if this species is like the early multicellular, then don't do anything to it with auto evo because it doesn't know how to do anything with it. So
well, I suppose we'll move on then. Next question, also by Doom Lightning, is are there any plans to start making events for the game? Things like extinctions or the great oxidation, or oxidations, be it more apt description. What about a biological eruption like the Cambrian explosion or decline in biodiversity? And if Oliver would like to answer this question.
Yeah, so I was interested in like the phrasing of this question because they referred to evolutionary events like the Cambrian explosion or declines in biodiversity, which I don't know to what extent those would be thought of as like hard-coded events in the game, because ideally you would want those things to happen a bit more procedurally. But I don't know how feasible that would be. But on the flip side, you could have some hard-coded events like a gamma ray burst or an asteroid impact or something that could happen randomly and have ramifications on the environment. So there will definitely be events at some point. I don't know which of the events you've listed would be good candidates for that, though.
May
Also,
I add something?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah. Also, I think some of these might happen sort of by themselves if we have get implemented the compound. What was it? Compound creation thing, and also if we start taking geographical movements into the patch map at one point or another. So, like, if it changes throughout the generations, then possibly some of these events might just happen by themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely the hope. That is the ideal to strive towards, but I personally don't know how close we're going to get.
I was going to say, and I think the big consensus is that Cambrian explosion it was a perfect moment of almost metazoans animals reaching a specific point of complexity to where they could branch off easily, and also like a rise in amount of oxygen available for consumption. So that, as Nagaroth said, that comes with part of it comes with compound production, but a part of it comes with just fleshing out evolution more almost.
I think it was also a time when life hadn't quite gone through the stages selective pressure, so there wasn't really any like high efficiency organisms. It was all experimental, as they just ended up complex, but without,
Yeah, if you see the animals right before the Cambrian explosion, they're almost plant-like, and they're very, very weird. So, like you said, selective pressure is a big thing.
And then they evolved things like eyes and stuff, and suddenly everybody had to have really effective weapons or defenses, otherwise they were going extinct.
Yeah, it's almost a good thing, because it kind of, how in the cellular stage there's kind of a soft introduction to it where it's calmer and allows you to familiarize with the mechanics. The same sort of soft reboot would be present in the macroscopic stage as well, so that's convenient for us.
Move on to the next question.
Of course. Let's see. So our next question is going to be kind of aimed at all of us. Are you happy with the situation the game is in at the moment? Are there places you want to improve or preserve for the next developments in the game? If anybody has some thoughts to add to that, I know I do.
I would like to graphically improve it. If maybe if I get the Godot build to work, I will implement stuff. But yeah, nothing is confirmed.
Alright. I do know that when it comes to graphics, there's a lot of room for improvement. Nunes, for example, has made a lot of the new models for like cell chunks and various environmental decor, but it hasn't quite made it to the game yet, and that for sure will liven up how the game looks and make it a lot more engaging. Personally, I feel like there's some improvement we could make in towards the general gameplay loop that I hope will make things more interesting. Here, Landon, are you struggling with the bot right now?
Yeah, it just plays the first song of the playlist, so
It just really wants us to hear the jazz theme over and over again.
I had it on loop, so that's probably why you couldn't skip it. There we go. Alright, so anyway, it's hard for me to say exactly, but I feel like there's just a few more points that we could improve in terms of gameplay, such as the degree of customization, but hopefully not quite to the point where it becomes too complex. I'd like the impact of your environment to be a little more meaningful. That's a pretty important one.
I think the exploration thread on the forums has some good ideas related to that.
Yeah, there are definite known paths forward to improve this to some extent. We just don't know how much.
Right on. Well, is there anything else you guys would like to add?
I mean, I'd like to mention, I think my biggest gripe with the game as it exists is just general performance. And I know a lot of other people playing the game have that issue. So I think I don't think I'll be very good at it, but I'll give it a go at looking into how to improve the performance for the next release in as many aspects as I can attempt.
If you manage to find some kind of tool or some way to figure it out, like let me know. I've already tried basically everything.
Yeah,
everything I know.
I'm definitely going to go over what you've already done and see what can and can't be done further.
Well, I suspect at least the Auto Evo, which is now pretty slow with the huge patch map, I suspect profiling that will actually turn up some places to cache some data in the Auto Evo to speed up things. But other than that, I'm not very hopeful about performance improvement.
Have we considered the C++ versions of Godot scripts, like GD native?
Well, I mean, I have considered it, and it might be faster, or it might actually not be any faster. We might be hitting like Godot Node 3 performance limits or something like that. So it might not actually be any faster. I've actually thought about like two mutually exclusive things. So one is to write like the game logic in C++, which would be basically rewriting all of the game logic, and then in the future anyone wanting to work on the game needs a C++ compiler and all kinds of stuff. Or one potential thing would be to separate the Godot parts and the game logic parts, so we could do it so that we can run like 10 C# threads in parallel, which process the game logic. Then we use Godot objects at the end to show the results. So that would mean that we don't depend on like the Godot physics or scene 3 performance as much. Basically, we'd only use Godot for rendering the game. But that also is basically an entire rewrite. But but would have the
Yeah, I
slight
doubt any of
benefit
the
that everyone can still use C#, so be easier for new people to set up that kind of stuff. But what I think is would actually be pretty easy if it's worth it is converting the compound cloud system and maybe the process system into C++. But those don't actually get that much slower with like 70 cells, so the performance improvement would be like static instead of related to the game entity count. So if some people can't run the game with 1 cell on screen, then it would help those people. But if someone can run the game with like 5 cells on screen, but not with 50, then this kind of refactoring would probably not help at all.
Alright, so I suppose that was our priority question that we just finished up.
Okay, so
for anyone wondering, you can become someone who can ask priority questions by subscribing to the appropriate tier on the Patreon.
Speaking of, let me just make sure that there aren't any new ones that popped up before we started.
at least I don't see any new posts, and the post hasn't been edited, so I don't think there are.
Alright, moving on then. So next up we have questions by Trappist.
Actually, one thing to mention before is that should we alternate between chat and the pre-stream questions to keep up viewer engagement a bit.
Sure, I think that sounds like a fine idea.
So yeah, should we take a chat question first and then get to the normal pre-stream questions?
Have we gotten any questions in the chat? I haven't seen any.
I mean,
personally.
I've seen at least like 2 or 3, but I didn't write them down or anything. Because
they're mostly arguing about coffee for some reason.
I'm more the tea person myself.
There's slight Quills asked how complex the cell stage is going to be, and I just remembered I wanted to link the wiki page roadmap about that, so we actually have some kind of rough idea what all features we actually want in the cell stage.
I will say it's important, of course, to have a good amount of features that are replayable, but it's also important to keep in mind that it's the beginning of an entire game, so it's important not to bog down the beginning of the game with so many features that just almost suppress the future parts of the game, if that makes sense.
Well said.
Also, in the later stages, we don't want to have so many systems that the player cannot actually focus on any of them at all. So
yeah, that's a big concern.
So all the time we need to consider how much mental load each feature adds for the player that they need to think about. So I can't remember the specifics, but there was some person who wanted in some of the later stages that some kind of like really complicated editor for something like really not consequential at all, but still would be like required for the player, and that's kind of the feature that I think would probably not be in the game, or maybe not enabled by default, which doesn't like really add that much, because I think at that point the player will have bunch of much more important and also huge systems that they need to use. So adding one more system that isn't like very important there might actually make the game worse. So
there's certainly a fine balance to strike between simplicity, ease of use, and depth.
I think the big system that's missing still, that I'd say would change the game dramatically, is environmental tolerances. And we've obviously been talking about that a bit, but that's a big question of how elaborate of a system are we willing to make for that one.
Yeah, I don't want it to be too complex. I don't want to have players worry about it too much unless they're planning on going into places that are not really that their organism isn't suited for.
Yeah.
I imagine it as more as like a barrier that defines an ecosystem more than a constant struggle to fight against.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think it just serve as something that makes sure you're not global immediately as a species.
Are we having music trouble again?
Yeah, I think there's a problem that everyone like sees the same buttons, and everyone like spams them at once. So in the future we should probably have one dedicated bot person, and everyone else does not touch the bot.
So it was set on loop. So goodbye, Unia. Oh, they're already gone.
I think the loop option is pretty stupidly programmed in that bot because it's playing a playlist. It should loop after the playlist ends, not each song.
It was set to track loop specifically. Now it's set to none.
Okay.
But I can set it to playlist queue. There we go. Maybe queue will do it. Anyhow.
So yeah, it actually shows the queue status, but if you press the shuffle button, that like doesn't show if it's on or not, or does it? At least it doesn't show any kind of different button.
Can we move back to questions on the thread while we're trying to debug this? Live music bot debugging.
Alright. So we've answered that question from Trappist. Shall we answer a question from the chat now? Such as, let's see. Got quite a few questions now, so let's try the Commonwealth. I see Game Dungeon has been keeping track. Well, I can personally say that I do love tea. I drink it almost every day, and I brew my own loose leaf.
I'm going to disappoint my entire country here and say I don't really like it.
Oh Lord. Me too, but oh Lord.
I'm sorry. I must renounce my Britishness now.
I've had 12 cups of coffee in a day. Also from America, so that's not surprising.
So in terms of the serious questions here, the Commonwealth system has asked, if you spend enough time in the microscopic stage, will there be micro disasters like some advanced civilization goofing up and causing an oil spill? I'm going to say probably not, because the hope is that the player will be the first to reach each development milestone.
I mean,
so you won't have any civilization.
They kind of asked that maybe, was it advanced civilization? Well, I guess that could be a space civilization as well. So, like comes from another planet to dump their garbage on your planet or something like that. But
I do love that my planet becomes a garbage planet for another species.
Anyway, this question is basically a variant of the thing that gets asked each time is that, like, can we have random asteroid impacts or some kind of mass extinction like that? And I mean, my answer is still that, do you want to have a random pop-up that says that game over, this event killed you, press OK to quit the game? Like, that's not good gameplay. So
some people do, apparently. Well, some developers in the past have advocated for it.
I think maybe this could be a joke new game option, just to please those people if they want to randomly lose the game.
So we can have those people who say, "Oh, if you don't have eyes, you shouldn't be able to see." A
Yeah,
game mode based off that
yeah,
could be.
that would be another good thing that
Just-
you could only like see outlines of cells when they play a sound or something like that.
Yeah, or you just start a game.
Don't render anything. Perfect performance.
Yeah. Start a game. It's a black screen.
Actually, that doesn't help. I've actually disabled the cell graphics rendering in my performance test, and that only went from like 5 FPS to like maybe 12. So that doesn't actually help.
Sounds like it doubled it to me.
Well, yeah, but the problem is that it's still unplayable at like the extreme entity constant. So
Just have 4 black screens, then you'll get up to 60 FPS. Problem solved.
It's just
yeah, well, I think some kind of like physics system updating like the Godot Scene 3 nodes, and because all of our organelles are individual nodes, then maybe that really saps performance, updating all of them or something like that. But yeah, the performance is basically, there's no like really easy low hanging fruit at the moment. I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to have a fun time trying to figure any of that out, and I very well may fail completely. But yeah. I feel like we should get back to the thread questions because people did post those first. So we do need to prioritize those.
Yeah. Where we left off there was how will the macroscopic gameplay? And I think we already answered that earlier.
Yeah, I think I already answered this, and also the next question about why we didn't call this 0.6. I rambled on about the not knowing what features will be done before picking like the version that we are working on. So that's why this is not called 0.6, because, well, I mean, I kind of want the microbe roadmap first to know when we should call the release 0.6. So
all right. Then we have the next question. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for the update to be called?
We just did that.
Oh.
yeah.
The next question is supposedly for Buckley. We've marked. How are you guys planning to implement Auto Evo in multicellular stage? And how is Macroscopic going to interact with microscopic life?
And I'd say that's a fascinating question. I did address that concept briefly in some of my past designs. When it comes to Auto Evo and multicellular, it will hopefully work mostly in as it does now. In early multicellular, it will probably just have the species occasionally add another hex for each additional cell. For the cells themselves, basically the same purpose. It's just the additional layer for Auto Evo to consider. The biggest difficulty, really, I think, will be making sure that Auto Evo actually creates a functional organism when it's dealing with actual specialized parts. It might get a little messy. As for
and maybe also some work needs to be done to avoid making total monstrosities in the early multicellular stage. Even now we have the total energy consumption limit kind of in the game, that the Auto Evo cannot make 50 organelle big cells. So some kind of similar limit probably is needed for the late multicellular, the early multicellular.
And as for the microscopic interacting with microscopic, now that is a little bit complicated in that when you're macroscopic, you won't really be seeing the microscopic life, but first thing that comes to mind is some kind of void cloud or some kind of noise system where microscopic life is reduced to what's essentially like visible algal blooms or clouds of microbial life, kind of like krill, or So being a macroscopic organism, you could potentially eat this stuff, much like how whales and other filter feeders do.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you're so macroscopic that, you're animal-sized, they would effectively be clouds, so you could almost treat them as an environmental compound, where you can alter the rate, say there's a disaster of sort, you could reduce the rate of microbe clouds, and that can affect the ecosystem, obviously, especially in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be kind on the game performance side as well if we can not render the individual cells, which is basically a requirement considering the current performance of the microbes.
I would never imagine Nether trying to do that with anything short of a quantum computer.
I'm sure some people developing this game in the past have thought of doing that, but yeah.
Unfortunately, quantum computers are slower at classical algorithms than current computers, so be even slower.
Huh, didn't know that.
Yeah, they are only faster at running algorithms designed for quantum execution, so you need special algorithms that take advantage
we just
of
need
the
to rewrite
stuff.
the entire game to specifically target quantum machinery. And we did.
Buy every dev a quantum computer.
Yeah, we
Go to
don't even
Patreon,
have
folks.
Yeah, that might be kind of out of the budget range.
Might be, huh?
Yeah, we might have to start vouching for some government, what do you call it? Subsidies or something?
Should we just say the classic response to this and say it may happen if someone decides to do it?
Yes, there we go. Alright, I hate to cut it short, but I have to go to work now. If Oliver, you'd like to take over from here.
Yeah, I can do.
Alright. You all have a good day. I'm glad to be here.
You too.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Thank you.
Let's see you.
So the next question from the thread was, how does everyone feel about development right now? Do we want literally everyone to answer this? Should we have the people type something and then go through speaking people to answer this, or is that going to take too long?
I mean, I don't think this is a very that interesting of a question, so
Fair enough.
Or if someone specifically wants to say how they feel about development right now, then maybe they can.
I've been super excited about it. I mean, I'm pretty new, and I've been a little bit struggling with learning the code base, but I think it's been kind of fun seeing my features actually get added to the game. And I think everyone feels like excited in some way.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting the first time you actually get some work into a release and see people playing with those features. As for how development is going, I'd say that development is pretty much going the same as the past couple of months, maybe even the past release. So development speed is much higher than it was like a year ago, and I feel pretty good about the current development velocity, even though we don't have that many active people working at things at the same time even now, but still.
Well, we had enough to fill this release with this much stuff, so.
Yeah, I actually someone mentioned this, but I think actually 0.5.6 has actually pretty much the same like length patch notes. It probably has fewer like major features, but in terms of pull requests done, it's probably pretty similar.
Yeah, I will maybe use this moment to just say hi, because I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I had something else to do. I'm Mirror Monkey. I'm a graphics artist, and what I think, just my personal, what I was very excited about is the patch map, that it's now every playthrough feels different because there are different planets. I think that's a very like major step in going from a game where every playthrough feels kind of the same to one which is very unique. That's how I feel about development right now.
Yeah, I'm also actually quite curious to see if there's going to be some kind of challenges among players with certain seats or like certain starting settings, I suppose. Like that could be quite curious to see what might happen
Maybe we
there.
should have a competition to see who can find the best seed.
Yeah. Or survive with like the lowest amount of DNA point per editor session. I cannot remember the settings, but like just turn them all like completely down or something like that. I don't know.
That might actually be impossible, but yeah, well, it's possible to do, impossible to play.
Whoever figures out how to play this.
Well, actually, like the no parts challenge is actually pretty easy. I don't know if the game balance is now way too different for it, but at least a couple of releases ago there was this mod that made placing parts impossible, and it basically made the game pretty easy. Because it's basically the speedrun strat is to get no parts, and well, actually I made the opposite mod, which adds a random part each time you go to the editor, and that is definitely a lot harder. Especially if you get the new nucleus the first time you go to the editor.
I tried that one and the one where the AI cell takes control, and I mean, it just goes terribly wrong every time.
I did manage to beat the random part challenge once, but yeah, I did just have to decide, okay, if I get a nucleus, I'm restarting. All right, shall we get another question from the chat, since we've had a couple of thread ones recently? Game Dungeon, do you have a good one that you think we should answer?
There's some listed right above. I can read one out by Carlito. It says, will the environment, such as grass, moss, basically any biomass, be actual living organisms or just decoration in the macroscopic/aware stage? Did we answer that already, or?
I think we touched on it, but didn't really answer this specific question.
I can just briefly address it.
Yeah.
I'll say that the original concept is everything is evolved and procedure generated, but that might be a bit of a ambitious thing. So perhaps we might settle on the majority of things will be a just static model, but other things, very few plants might be randomly evolved, something like that. It's just something that I addressed briefly with Sessile gameplay, and it's just ultimately really difficult because, those plants will have to fill an environment, so we can't just have everything be evolved alongside the player. Else that would just take up too much, I don't know, performance.
Well, I think we won't fully know before we get there, but I hope we can actually make it so that all life is made by Auto Evo. And I already have ideas, like we might if something is determined to be like grass or something, we'll render it to a billboard texture and then place that on the ground for performance reasons. So I can see that we probably can generate all of the stuff, though we need to solve the problem of what happens if no trees evolve. Do we need to tweak Auto Evo so that gives so big benefits for the first thing that looks like a tree that it always happens.
Yeah, that's a big concern. I think ultimately, perhaps some models can be just installed like just without auto evo, but perhaps the majority of things can be auto evo, or vice versa.
Yeah, and I think even if there are some things which aren't auto-evolved, we may just kind of have to put them artificially into some kind of tree of life, which so from the lore side, it kind of evolved from the first Luca, but yeah.
Well, that sounds even harder than making auto ensure that it makes suitable stuff.
Yeah, maybe yes. I was just thinking like you just paste them artificially into the tree of life.
I mean, I can already imagine like people asking that, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this feature here? And then we like tweak it release after release to make it more intelligently place the things, and eventually it's harder than just making auto generate them naturally.
Yeah, in that case, never mind. I mean, I'm all for generating everything, but all right. In that case, ignore that
there are
proposition.
All right. Going back to the thread then. Next question. What is the next step for Auto Evo? I think we've spoken a bit about this in terms of Maxinovian's changes to environmental compounds in response to the processing
and
of species.
I think I already talked about early multicellular being something that Auto Evo needs to actually know about, because it doesn't currently know about it at all, so that would be a pretty good next step as well.
Yeah. I think there are also some cases in which Auto Evo makes strange decisions about the survivability of cells, which is very confusing for players. So I think that is definitely something to look into as well.
Well, I mean, in most cases, I think the players just slap on way too many organelles, like their cells are huge behemoths. So unless we want Auto Evo to also make that kind of NPC species, we can't fully allow those. So
I think it's really interesting.
I think it's more of a problem about trying to like the Auto Evo explanation should be made much more like interesting visually or something, so players would actually read it and try to understand what they need, or maybe we should just implement that one idea that the editor would actually show you one good organelle that you can add each cycle, so players could decide to add what Auto Evo wants.
So, Thim, you had a thing you were saying. You got cut off.
Yeah, I feel that it was very interesting since 0.5.6, when this the exploring tool and inflecting the player showed up, that really what we're seeing now is the evolution kind of sort of makes species that work in the environment as evolution worked on Earth. But now that it's directly judging one individual or one individual species, we're kind of trying to make natural selection do something that it doesn't actually do and wasn't built to do. And like actually tell you, yes, that was a good or bad decision, which I find is just a very unique problem that, real biologists don't have to worry about.
What do you mean by that? So, because the Auto Evo prediction runs the full Auto Evo system, like, I think one step instead of like 10 steps. And then says to the player that, hey, your population is predicted to go up or down.
It does. And when we see the end results, the species in the environment, we get some complaints, but far fewer about, how is this a viable plant? How is that a great species? Because we look at the aggregate. We say, this is covered in green stuff, it's a plant. This moves fast, it eats stuff, it's a predator. We're not seeing the individual numbers go up and down. But when you give it that fine-grained control and let a player make this or that tweak and go, I have an idea, I'm going to add a flagella. And Auto Evo says, no, that's a bad idea. And then we see a lot of players say, well, hold on a second. I think it's a great idea because of this, but I can't explain that to evolution. And kind of just having that argument with the algorithm that I think's created some interesting, not necessarily good, but interesting interactions that I think we'll need to contend with in the future.
Okay, I see your point now.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult making the player understand what's going on with the simulation as a whole. That's definitely a challenge. So moving on, unless anyone has anything else. Yeah, Maxinovian definitely has a tool task ahead. I agree. The next question, how will the upgrade system be implemented? And this was a question we had marked for Buckley, but Buckley has since left us. So does anyone want to pick this one up?
I guess I can, since I'm part of the design team. Yeah. The big idea is that we want to stay away from flat upgrades, where it's like, you know, in most other games, it's like, oh, just add these stats on and on and on. Buckley's still alive.
Yes, but has since left us is perhaps not the best phrasing there. Sorry.
I just lost my... Oh, wait, I remember now. Okay, we want more trade-offs, almost, where, you know, you either get good at this thing or the other thing. So, for example, you know, flagella, as an example. You know, you can have a flagella that makes you faster, but maybe turn radius will be reduced, or vice versa, and stuff like that. And it's just almost a balancing act with sliders, almost, you know, different sliders affecting different features of a organelle. If that answers the question.
I think it does.
Something that might actually be in the next release is that the Cilia pulling feature. I think that could be really interesting. You can make the Cilia pull like prey into you, or you can keep it like movement helping part. So that would be like you can pick with the upgrade what kind of functionality you want the organelle to have.
Yeah, I'm going to make my cell into a Roomba. Comes along and vacuums up everything.
Yeah, and then you proceed.
I mean, isn't that almost a crap? Really?
Then you proceed to die to all of the pili that all of the other cells have evolved to counteract you.
Yeah, we definitely need to make sure there are counters for these sorts of things, and nothing is super overpowered.
Disco Cilia.
So we've spoken about the upgrade system. How is progress going with the Auto Evo exploring tool? Unfortunately, Ajax, who is the primary person working on that, is not currently in the stream, so they can't answer. But there has been some definite progress that I've seen that looks quite interesting. Someone who's actually looked at the code may know a bit more.
I have not, unfortunately, but I mean, from what I've seen from the screenshot, it looks like the basic functionality is probably already basically done. So it might actually be pretty close to doing something useful. But then, of course, we want this kind of feature where you can like tell it to run auto evo 100 times with random starting conditions, and then collect some kind of averages for all of the runs, because that's going to be like a pretty key feature in testing auto evo changing pull requests, so people can check that to see if it's actually better or not, instead of just asking a few people to play with the changes for 30 or
minutes or 1 hour. While this will be in the game as a tool you can access from the main menu, this is definitely more useful for developers than players. So I should clarify that.
Yeah, actually there's one feature which actually makes it maybe a bit interesting, is that there might be a button to like enter the game world that it has created. So maybe you want to like run up to generation 1000 with maxed out mutation rate and then start playing from there or something like that. So it might be a bit.
I can only
bit of
imagine the
fun.
performance.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be that different from like generation 50 or something, because there's the max species limit per batch, so it should stabilize at some point the amount of species.
Right. And then the next question was, what information will it show to the players? So yeah, this is, as I said, this will be just something in the menu to use. This won't actually be inside main gameplay.
Yeah.
But it will use all of the gameplay systems, I suppose.
I mean, the goal is that it will show all of the auto evo reports, and you can look at the species, what they look like, that it has generated, etc.
People are talking, how long do you leave it when you walk away? And I'm wondering, like, if you leave it long enough, will sentient life appear? That's the danger. Always a danger with these things.
That'll be in the final Thrive version, that auto evo can create sentient life if it runs long enough.
Right, on to the next question we had from the thread. Any plans to add more metabolism types like methane oxidation, oxidation of iron 2 using oxygen, or respiration using compounds other than oxygen, nitrate, sulfate, iron 3, etc.? Or are you happy with the current amount of variety or compounds? Is anyone willing to pick this up? Yeah?
I can say that we discussed this briefly, and it seems like we have a lot of the major groups of metabolism in unicellular organisms, and any other metabolism strategy would be almost, exactly the same in terms of gameplay. For example, with methanogens, it would be very similar to autotrophic gameplay. So I'd say there's no major metabolism strategies to be added that are yet to be added. But only one thing I can see is maybe fleshing out the sulfur and the nitrogen organelles a bit more, just to introduce the nitrogen and sulfur cycle. But that's still up for discussion and design, so it's not exactly a set in stone plan.
Isn't the thinking to also add radiotrophs? Do we know what kind of gameplay that would involve?
Yeah, I forgot about that. I remember it was briefly. It'd be a pretty unique gameplay. Yeah, that's probably might be added soon enough, and that would be an interesting add. It would basically be you try to find radioactive rocks and you stay near enough to those rocks, but far enough so that you don't get damaged, and you just stay in that medium of generating energy.
Yeah, that's definitely a feature that could be in the next release, as long as some programmer gets interested and picks up that idea.
Very random thought, which is not kind of it's kind of an idea guy thought, which is maybe not needed. But if a species takes most of its energy from radiotrophy, would it have more mutation points in the editor because of the mutations through the radiation?
I mean, it's definitely something to consider. It makes sense from a gameplay and reflecting real life perspective, but we have for a long time now maintained that the amount of mutations each generation is fixed.
Well, we have the discount system now, so we could give 5 or 10% discount.
True.
But yeah. I think most, like in real life, because if you mutate too fast, you will actually just die out. So I would imagine that like the like what, can't remember the organelle name that would absorb the radiation, so we could kind of hand wave it, that say that actually also performs some kind of like DNA repair functionality to counteract the radiation effects or something, so we don't have to implement an extra feature. But
Yeah, and that would probably cancel out the benefits of fast remutation as well. So yeah, never mind. It's just a random thought.
All right. And finally from this user, sorry, 2 more questions from this user. Did you ever consider requiring some glucose to reproduce? Right now, cells with rustocyanin or thermoplasts can survive and reproduce technically without access to any organic compounds. Does anyone have thoughts on this?
Sounds like we would need a theorist here.
I will say, I think autotrophs can reproduce without any organic compounds because they produce it themselves. At least I think. Don't quote me on that. I think that's their official terminology. But we did consider that before. I forgot exactly what it was that made us decide against it. But the gameplay loop is under discussion, where reproduction might change soon enough, but that's not a focus right now. I brought up an idea a while ago regarding that, but it isn't the focus right now, so that's probably in a future update.
I think it would be simple enough to require ATP in order to reproduce, because right now you can reproduce if you're losing ATP or health or whatever, but that might take some balancing.
One big proposal that was suggested, I think I kind of made the idea popular, is having it so that there's a passive reproduction rate where it takes you it's too much to describe right now, but basically there's a whole concept which we might address in the future, but for now it's a bit in the distance.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Next question. Hydrogen sulfide is normally a gas, same as oxygen, CO2 and nitrogen, and has at times been widely present in the atmosphere. What was the thought process behind keeping it as compound clouds unlike the others? Were any of us even around back when it was decided?
Well, I was, but I can't really remember. I'm going to guess that it would be basically just a clone of photosynthesis.
That would be my thinking as well.
Yeah. So basically, you need to still hunt down one resource to survive with that. So it serves a gameplay purpose to keep that as a cloud that you need to find. Because basically, like for the oxygen, was basically that you need to find 2 resources to survive. Glucose and oxygen. So you might be full on the other and die because you don't have any of the other one. So I think it was due to gameplay purposes really to make it so that you need to find one resource to survive, and then like the hydrogen sulfide is an alternative. So in that energy source, you still need to find that one type of cloud to survive. So
yeah, it definitely streamlines things to remove the dependence on finding oxygen in the environment. Right. Right. Let's do another chat question, shall we? Will there be more speculative adaptations other than thermosynthesis? I think we've spoken about this. We would like there to be, but we don't really know of any. So yeah. Will the flagellum or thermoplast have modifications? I think yes. There's been talk of having the ability to straighten or widen flagella to create greater thrust or whatever.
Flagella for sure. Thermoplast probably too, but we need to think about potential implementation of that.
Well, I remember someone saying that there could be a trade-off between like how big the temperature range you need to hit is and how much energy you get. So you can be like really picky with the temperature and get a ton of energy, or you can be less picky and get less overall energy, or something like that could be good enough trade-off for an upgrade for it.
Yeah, that was my first thought as well.
All right, back to thread questions. How do you plan to deviate from metaball units in... Hold on, I've just realized that metaball and metabolism, very close. Could have made a pun for that with the dev blog title. Oh well. How do you plan to deviate from metaball units in macroscopic to bone-like parts in the aware stage? Is it going to be a smooth transition?
I can address this. I'll go ahead.
I think that, well, I mean, even in aware states, it's going to be metaballs. It's going to be all of the macroscopic creatures are going to be metaballs all the way. And basically, joints will be special links between metaballs that are marked as joints so they can move.
Yeah, I was gonna say from if you're addressing more of like the switch between soft bodies and bones and stuff like that, I think we'll ultimately end up having different tools depending on your morphology. So, for example, a soft-bodied organism would have different parts than a internal skeleton organism, and depending on your choices and what you decide to do, you have different benefits and parts based on the path you pick.
Sounds like extra work for implementation. So
yeah, it's a question of how much work.
I'm going to say that being just a normal metaball thing with simple bones between metaballs that you mark as joint is going to be like the first step. Then in the future, if we want to have like those soft body creatures or something like that, then we'll figure out how to make those different from the default way of being.
It's just difficult because soft-bodied organisms came before skeletal-based organisms, and obviously exoskeletons, they don't have internal skeletons, so we need some sort of thought dedicated towards that.
Right, should we move on? What makes macroscopic different from early multicellular besides 3D environment? If there are many differences, do you ever think they should be separated into two different stages? Does anyone have thoughts on this?
I think this person doesn't know our plan that state transitions are as smooth as possible. So basically, if someone has actually played the macroscopic prototype, they have actually fully experienced a different stage. And well, even the early multicellular, that is also a different stage, but you play in the microbe environment still. And even going further back, I think it was Untrusted Life who said that you could basically argue that before you get a nucleus, that is also like a different stage, because getting the nucleus unlocks so much new stuff that you basically are in a different part of the game. So I mean that's the kind of smoothness that we try to have between the different stages.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get it to feel smooth and not disjointed different types of gameplay like you had in, say, Spore. But it's always been the hope. So we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, the hardest is probably going to be from microscopic to macroscopic. It's probably going to be one of the hardest to make smooth, so I'm not too worried about that, and so it will stay like a prototype, that transition for a long time.
Okay. Do you also consider having substages for any other future stage, as you did for multicellular? I feel like this is too far in the future for us to answer right now.
Well, I mean, anything you can concretely define as having sort of like the gameplay or available options as different, you can consider that a substage. Similarly to prokaryotic and eukaryotic, those can be considered substages. So I mean, this is all just semantics. All of the stages are just labels to help talk about things. This doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, there was a thread on the community forum saying, was someone talking about substages for space stage, I think, and that was the same conclusion, where it's just semantics almost.
Yeah. Opportunity for someone else to answer a question here, because we've marked this one as for Thim. Is there any way for the behavior tab to get completely abolished at some point? In my opinion, the whole population of your species should only depend on your actions during gameplay. I find it no fun changing the settings manually from the editor tab, and it is not very expressive. So, controversial one here. Do you want to answer this, Tim? Is it Tim or Thim?
I think it's Thim. I started this username as a little kid and cannot tell you why I picked it, but
Right.
I have kept it through years.
Okay, I'll stick
Perhaps
with
it's a
Thim
metaphor for Thrive as well. But yeah, no, I want to speak to this one because I'm now going to try it in the experiments fork, see if it works at all. I have some ideas how you might have the game think, here's what I would have done if it was an AI-controlled cell, but here's what the player did. So I think you're less aggressive than I would have been, yada yada. But I'd love to hear the broader community's reaction to this thought. The having more dials and buttons to turn versus having things be a reflection of your gameplay. I think both could be said to be the truer Thrive. So I just like to hear more bounce back on this one. Do you want buttons taken away if it feels more, I guess, evolution-y or expressive?
It feels somewhat Lamarckian to me, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I had that thought too.
To have or not have the dials?
To not have the dials. And that your actions during your life are affecting the evolution of your species, which is not how it works, but it could, for behavior, it could definitely work as a gameplay element.
Yeah, and it keeps you from doing that kind of cheat of saying, well, I say the species works like this, but as a member of the species, I'm just special and do different things.
Yeah,
exploited
there is
somewhat.
currently a way to cheese that a bit. If you say, like, if loads of other members of your species are hogging all the resources, you can make them all sessile, and they won't move.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a cheat in that regard.
The fun flip side would be to bind the player's actions to what you picked in the behavior editor, but that's a terrible way to do it.
I feel like there's something in there.
Another thing you could do is, like, you have casual mode, which is like the default, where it's not, it's your player's actions does the behavioral traits, and then have like a advanced tab where you check a button and then you can go into like modify all the numbers. So like giving the player more control.
That's what I did with the new game settings. So yeah, it's always an option.
My
Pencil it down to
concern
something else.
with this feature is that it's going to be really difficult to try to detect what the player is doing, especially because there's been, I think, pretty old concepts where you could actually like design behavior, so you could choose a trigger, some kind of condition, and then what your species will do, like this kind of thing. And I think it got pretty good feedback from like the fans at the time. So like that would be an absolute nightmare for some kind of code AI system to try to detect if that the player is like I don't know, maybe if you can, like, if you see 3 enemies and there's less than 2 friends, then run away or something like that. Might be in like the full-on behavior editor of like earlier designers' dreams. So like that would be like an absolute nightmare to try to infer that info from the player's playing style. So
yeah, well, we'll think about it. It's something to put into the future category. Next question. How are you going to handle food chains? What will be the factors to determine a species as a predator or prey? When do you think you can start working on it? Do we have thoughts on this?
Well, one part of this is that basically whatever AutoEvo says is the food chain. So the actual display of the food chains will be whatever AutoEvo decides. So this is actually an AutoEvo question in disguise. And well, basically, I think currently AutoEvo basically considers that almost any cell can kind of predate on any other cell. Just their fitness will be either super low or very high if they have suitable organelles to attack and be fast enough.
And if Castoric was here, he'd probably have a way to explain how to visually represent a food chain, because we still need to implement that. Our food web, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
at least that is just a question of like some kind of graph theory or drawing some kind of least overlapping lines or something like that. But actually, the hard part will be to try to make it make sense. So that is actually like AutoEvo's code changes that are needed for that.
All right. Should we look at some questions from the chat? Game Dungeon has noted a couple that they would like to answer themselves. So I'll read them out and you can type them while I look at another one. Those questions are: how would planet generation work, and will the type of star affect things in the game? So I'll let Game Dungeon type out answers to those and ask some other question. Which one of these is particularly interesting? Evolving myself into a corner has always been frustrating. I've always wondered if it could be possible for the players to jump to an organism more successful than yourself, rather than starting over. I mean, evolving into a corner is definitely a problem, or if something that could trip you up in the game. And my feeling on that is that it should be a problem in the game. Like, that's the entire point of the game, to not do that. But does anyone else have any thoughts?
I think I've opened a GitHub issue that if the player dies too many times, it should suggest that load your oldest autosave or something. The autosave system is kind of the backup, so you can go back. I think 2 or 3 editor cycles with the default setting of 5 autosaves. So it's kind of a meta answer to the gameplay problem, that you can actually load an earlier save.
Go ahead.
So I experimented with a more in-game, easier change, which was if you die enough times, you get a little screen that says, but actually, some of your species are mutants and they were better, and just gives you one free editor cycle to try to get out. It doesn't help if you really put yourself in a bad niche, but I do feel a flaw with the game's loop really is that if you make a mistake in the editor, you don't find out until gameplay. And right now, there is no way to go back.
Autosaves.
Yeah, well, I think, maybe the question is then, how do we make it more seamless to load an autosave in those cases, and make it clear to the player that something has gone wrong?
That definitely is a design thing I've noticed, and I also want to help kind of offer not exactly a way out, but an alternative to allow you to play in the same world almost. So we can probably expect a design for that. I'll bring it up later.
Excellent. I'm conscious that we are 10 minutes away from the 2-hour mark, so we might want to speed through the last few questions and call it a day there, if that's all right with everyone.
Sounds good.
Right. Has the expected completion date for the game, 150 months, changed in any way whatsoever? This is the date that's listed on the Steam page. I'm going to say, well, here, Elaine, can answer that.
I'll say that I just posted a link to an issue about showing a tutorial if the player dies too many times to tell them to load an autosave. And this is from December 2021. As to the completion thing, it's about still on track. Maybe once we reach the 1 year anniversary for having released on Steam, we'll decrease it by like 1 year.
Yeah, I feel like when it was created, it was very, very rough. And it was mainly made to appease the requirements of being added to Steam.
Yeah, and well, it's kind of also like minimum viable product kind of stuff, because like if we just have like 2 years to kind of work on each of the later stages, like that's not going to be like much gameplay at all. I think we have pretty good chance that we might be able to finish the microbe stage in 1 or 1.5 years. So we kind of are on schedule in terms of that, but if we still want to keep up some quality, we definitely need to get more development effort going into the game in the next few years.
So yeah, I don't think the 150 months was ever particularly accurate, and it still isn't. I think is the takeaway from that. But it will happen when it happens. You have to take this approach to thrive, in my experience.
Or else you go insane.
Yep. Next question from the thread. Have you ever considered shifting focus entirely to developing content for the pre-society stages, those that revolve around biological evolution, or are you committed to the original scope of the game? Well, Hiralainen, who is intending to make several prototypes, I would expect you to have some thoughts on this.
Well, I mean, so far we have never got anything out of the game scope that has been kind of set that would be in the game at some point, so might take a really long time, but I mean the plan has always been and still is to make the entire game. Even if it takes like 2 decades to get the later stages actually like fully playable and fun, and not noticeably like drop in quality after the first few stages.
I mean, I would hazard a guess that most of us, if not all of us, are far more interested in the biological stages than the society ones. So if it's purely dependent on the current team's position.
I remember a few podcasts ago we had like everyone answered their most expected states, and I think we got something like almost 50% were more interested in the later stages than the earlier stages.
Okay, I must be misremembering then. Yeah.
Maybe that's the community you're thinking of, Olivier.
Potentially, yeah. So yeah, I think everything is in scope until we actually have to do it. Is the point. Next question we had was, what will be the main components of 0.5.9? I'm assuming either they mean what are the main components of 0.5.9, in which case we've spoken about them, or what are the main components of the release after that, which we've spoken a bit about as well. So I'm just going to skip that. Will you be able to make custom organelles for our playthroughs? For example, turn X chemical into ATP or Y environmental feature into glucose?
This would be part of the full endosymbiosis implementation, and right now I'm kind of dreading having to implement this, so I kind of want to push it back to the like not confirmed features pile for finishing the microbe state. So probably we'll have just like the light version where you unlock organelles or some other benefits from engulfing bacteria, but you won't create new organelles from those bacteria you engulf. So kind of, maybe not going to be like.
I mean, there is a kind of a way to do this already with the game, and that's to, mod in some extra organelles in the JSON files. But that requires more effort than that sort of thing would in an ideal scenario. Moving on to a question I think we can all give a quick answer to. Favorite animal, or actually any favorite life form, including plants or protozoa or whatever. The people not speaking right now, if you would like to type in the chat what your favorite animal is.
I'm just going to send a picture of mine. It explains it all.
I'm excited. And anyone itching to... That's adorable.
It hates the world.
Anyone want to jump in and say what their favorite life form is?
Humans. I've had the most interesting arguments with them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's quite hard to have arguments with an ant or something. What's my favorite animal? I don't really know, to be honest. I like crocodiles. They're cool.
If in doubt, just say a bald eagle.
But I'm not American.
Yeah, but still.
You already gave up on tea, Oliver. Just join us.
Yeah, fair point.
Throw in the harbor, get across the sea.
Not yet. Not yet.
For me, it has to be a cat. I mean, it's still the internet.
Yeah. Anyone else want to propose their favorite animal, or should we move on to the last few questions?
I like ants. They do so complicated things, but their brains are so tiny.
So many people on the forums love ants. I'm not sure why. Actually, no, that sounds disrespectful. They're interesting creatures, but it's very surprising.
They run in a circle and kill themselves if one of the ants go the wrong direction.
That's more depressing.
Fun facts on the Thrive stream. All right, I'm going to say we've answered that one. As more progress is made on future prototypes, how will development change? Will things like early multicellular get worked on alongside unicellular? Or will it only be unicellular receiving work while the other prototypes serve as more proof of concept? I feel like the latter is probably going to be true initially.
Well, I'm probably the only one going to be working on the prototype, so that's going to be pretty. They are going to be pretty simple, and the rest of the team will probably focus on microbe completion.
I've been having fun working on the multicellular, and it's probably the part of the code base that I know the best.
Okay, you might have help then.
Yeah, that's true, but yeah, actually, yeah. Now that you say it, it's true. But I considered your like shooting toxins from our colony members, like it also helps in the microbe state. So I considered it a microbe stage feature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just kind of do whatever code base is the least developed because it's the easiest for me to read right now.
I think from the graphics side, I can see multiple people also maybe trying to work on the early multicellular graphics and trying to develop kind of a visual language of how these things might look in the early 3D stage, and because that's kind of can go side by side with Hirlane working on the meat of the early 3D stage and also of the multicellular stage in 2D.
Yeah, that there are some aspects or some areas of development that can be worked on way ahead of time, like music, for instance, which is why we've got so much music for just late game that will probably never end up in an actual game.
And I mean, for example, just as one small example, the skybox in the 3D 3D editor which we now have, I guess it can be very easily replaced by just a kind of a generic watery skybox, right? And that would probably already be the first tiny step of progress in kind of the graphics of the 3D stage.
Nance is probably going to attack you for saying that, because Godot uses this kind of different kind of skybox than square textures, so you need actually a special tool to convert or to make them, but yeah, they are possible to make.
Oh yes. In that case, maybe we can just take an icosphere and make it really big and kind of put it there. But yeah, never mind. I'm really starting to learn Godot right now, just so I in that case, I'm sure you're right.
All right. Okay, last two questions. Let's get these done quickly. What are the plans for keeping Thrive development from slowing down relative to the amount of work required? The further Thrive goes along and the more developed it gets, the more work will be required to continue adding more content. Very true.
Yeah.
I suppose the hope is that that will be balanced out by an increase in developer man-hour availability, whether that be through extra people or extra funding.
Well, actually, extra people usually make a software project go slower if there is no good coordination. So right now, I'm trying to keep up the code quality, ensure people follow the style guide so that different parts of the game don't look like they are written in completely different styles, making them hard to understand. And also, I did some refactoring to split out like the common stage parts that microbe and multicellular share. So my hope is that with careful code quality and refactoring when it makes sense to combine functionality, I hope that with those we can actually keep the game from getting bogged down and too hard to change in the future. So I'm hopeful at the moment that we don't run into this issue.
Yeah, it's definitely a very difficult balancing act to pull off. We need more people to help, but at the same time, organizing more people is just, it requires more overhead, as any software developer will know. Right, on to the final question, it turns out, is one we've already answered, which is very convenient, which was the one about making the AI imitate the player's own behavior. So unless we have any more thoughts on that, I believe we are done with the questions from the thread. So maybe we should pick out a few of the most interesting ones from the chat and then finish. So does anyone have any of the chat questions that they've been itching to answer?
Someone asked if you could have intelligent plants. That's a common question that always hears no as the answer.
That's easy. Will an encyclopedia of life you find in the game be developed before version 1.0? I'm not quite sure what you mean by the encyclopedia of life you find in the game. There are a few options for that. The one I'm quite partial to is there's been a concept for a while to have fossilization, which is where you can save specific species you find in the environment to just view in the main menu or something later. So you build up your own kind of museum or encyclopedia of a load of cool species you find throughout your various games. And I'd quite like to work on that for this next release, but we'll see how time works out.
I also remember.
Interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Will you be actually also making it viewable in game? Because if you are planning to do that, then I think it kind of makes sense to also start on the Thriveopedia section of the pause menu.
I wasn't sure. I was going. I was going to post about designing it first and get some feedback on that.
But yeah, it probably makes also sense because, like we have it now, the species as they are in the right now in the generation you play in, the data of them is already saved, right? So you can just display them, and with the fossilization, then you have to kind of save a separate version of these species like they were at that moment. So
yeah, there's nothing fundamentally difficult about
No,
it. It will just have to
you're right.
use a lot of different systems together.
Yeah. But I saw someone posting a picture today, actually, in one of the I think the GUI thing, where in the GUI Discord of something which looks very much like the Thriveopedia. I was kind of confused. Do you know?
I think I found
Ajax
it.
posted it.
Yeah.
The thing Ajax posted, is that the kind of the...
Oh, that's the
Should I put it in the...
If you're talking about the Auto Evo Explorer tool.
Yes, exactly. And I mean,
yes, because I'm planning to basically wait until that's done.
Yeah,
before
right.
I start on anything, because that will have a lot of the systems done already.
Yes. And so that's great. We can just reuse kind of that interface for fossilization and for the in-game Thriveopedia.
Anyone else have any questions from that list that they're burning to answer? Otherwise, we might think about wrapping it up. Shuffling this music playlist has given me some unexpected throwbacks right now. I made this theme in, what, 2013? God.
Nostalgia.
I just clicked the link to try and view the theme on YouTube, and it went to Rick Astley. I didn't learn. It doesn't sound like anyone has any other questions they would like to answer for now.
Yes. There's that new menu question again. Basically, someone on the community Discord, I think in the concepts channel, showed a new sleeker looking main menu. Basically trying to get like feedback on it, and I mean my feedback was that, well, it looks better than the current menu.
I quite like the current menu, to be honest, but it could still be replaced.
Yeah, and I think someone replied with that we might eventually get some kind of like 3D graphics going on in the menu background related to like the latest states you played in the game. And in the new game setup screen, it would like show some kind of planet visuals or something for you to look at. But yeah, I mean the new menu. I mean I would welcome it if someone wants to program that and tweak up the Godot GUI scenes for the main menu. And once again, the feature is just waiting for programmers to pick it up to make it happen.
I saw an interesting comment on my Thrive video that I made. Someone was talking about another game where people kept asking the developers to make things, and they came up with a bot that responded to them with when you code it. I feel like that could be applicable for some of these things, but maybe I don't know, not sure that's what we should do.
It isn't the nicest thing, but well, we are open source project, so for us it would actually be true that they could code the feature and send it to us.
That is the advantage of it. And I might use that as a springboard to talk about wrapping up. So yes, Thrive is open source. You can contribute, you can join the team, you can get it for free, or you can get it on Steam to support the developers and also subscribe to the Patreon. Thank you very much to those of you who have come along today. I hope you enjoy playing the latest release. Does anyone else have anything they want to say to wrap things up?
We were not once asked about underwater civilizations.
Why'd you bring it up? Why'd you bring it up?
Someone
Somebody
asked,
said
but
something.
I thought we were
Something.
purposefully ignoring that question.
Just until now.
I was.
Someone get the 0 to put on the days since underwater civilizations.
I think someone also asked about intelligent plants in the chat. I think I saw that as well, so reset the counter on that as well.
Yes, this underwater civilizations notwithstanding. Anything else?
I posted the get involved link, so if someone wants to join the team, you can read up on there. Or, well, if you're a programmer, you can head over to our GitHub and try to find some issues to work on directly, and then just do a pull request to show off your skills.
All right. Doesn't sound like we have anything else to discuss. So I guess Hiralainen, you'd like to stop the stream at some point soon.
Yeah.
Thanks again to everyone for coming along, both
No,
developers
thank
and
you.
viewers. Hope people have enjoyed it.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah. See ya.
See you.